Hello class and welcome back to Anatomy Unplugged. My name is Ken Vitale. I'm a physician and teach anatomy and physiology. And in this series, we review some tips and tricks from class to help with the learning apropos for this lecture, which is on the brain. I also like to play around with my art backgrounds, combine a little bit of surrealism and digital art for this one, expressionism for that one. I like that very much. This is the outline that we covered in class, and we're going to use this loosely for a set of mnemonics that we're going to go over. This first one you probably recall from the skeletal lecture. I don't know why this mnemonic sticks, but it works. Old people from Texas eat spiders. I don't think they do, but what the heck, the mnemonic works. In terms of the calvarium, the calvus, or this cap here coming across the top, does mean bald in Latin, if that helps you remember the anatomy. Poor bald skull here. Fun fact of the skull, there's only one bone that moves in the skull, since these are all basically sutures, which is the bone that moves, and it's kind of the trick question. It's actually down here, part of the skull, but it's called the mandible. One little piece of medical trivia that I like to also sprinkle in, the pterion or pterion is the area where a lot of the bones that we just learned in the mnemonic come together, and it's the thinnest part of the skull, right over the middle meningeal artery, which unfortunately is a site where people can get, if you get trauma, you can get an epidural hematoma there pretty easily. Also a conveniently thin spot to drill for craniotomy. That's not what we cover on the exam, don't worry, we're not going to have that, but it's just a nice little piece of learning. Another famous mnemonic that we just include in class to help with the learning, scalp. This is very commonly used to go over the layers of the scalp down to the periosteum or the bone. As you continue down from bone inward, we have another one. Well, I don't know how well this works for you, but bright experts do study anatomy, so people can too, I guess. I don't know. That's if you have a better one, please let me know. I'd love to use it and teach our other students, but this is the mnemonic to go down the list in terms of each layer as we go all the way down to your brain, the cerebrum. I guess you could substitute a B there if you can come up with a better mnemonic. I can see the word beds in here and asp, like a snake asp. I don't know. We got to figure out something. Please let me know if you have a mnemonic. Drop it in the comments. I would love to teach it to my students. Here's another one that, yeah, it's, I don't know if this is working, but maybe this works better for you. Brainiacs excel during stressful academics. So, push yourself cerebrally. All right, on to the meninges. DAP, DAP, that's the straight one, just DAP, DAP, DAP it up. Dura, arachnoid, and pia from outer to inner. Mater, or mater, means mother. So dura mater is the tough mother. If anyone knows that race, obstacle race, pretty tough to do. Pia means the tender mother, right? Just like that. Or pious mother, actually. Pia actually means pious. So hopefully that can help you remember. And then the arachnoid here, as drawn up here and down there, if you can see that, as for its spider web style appearance. The cerebrum itself, the lobes here, this one's a little boring. F. Pot, I guess it's kind of like DAP. It's just a quick mnemonic to remember. However, I got this one from a student. Smoke pot and you'll get an F minus. I like how they use the hyphen there, or this one even more blunt and to the point. I really like the hyphen there. It's grammatically correct as well. Maybe that'll help you learn it. An interesting excuse I would like to say is my prefrontal cortex did not fully develop until at least mid-20s, so I hope that's my out for some questionable activities and things I did in my youth. Maybe you can use that too. Some medical trivia, the homunculus, if you heard about this, we didn't cover it too much in class. It means a little mini human or humanoid creature. Is a map that shows just how much neurons are devoted to different parts of the body, and the hands and mouth and lips are just huge compared to the foot, which shows how much sensory and to a certain extent motor processing we have devoted to each body part. And yes, there are homunculi in other areas of life. I don't know if you're kind of a Dungeons and Dragons person or a card game, but they're out there, some weird, creepy homunculi. On to the ventricles. This one, it's a stretch, but maybe literature class, you get a C, you keep messing up, you're going to get an F, lit CF. Maybe that works for you, but it's the flow starting out at the lateral ventricles here, down through that interventricular foramen of Monroe, by the way, right there. We'll get to that in a minute. Down to the third ventricle, because 1, 2, and then 3, down to the fourth ventricle. Hopefully that makes sense. So the 2 lateral ventricles are the first and second, down to the third, through the cerebral aqueduct to get to the fourth, and then you're done. If you wanted to fully complete the mnemonic, you could add the apertures and finally into the meninges. So maybe, I don't know, if you get a C in literature, your family's going to be upset. I'm not sure. Please come up with a better mnemonic than I can for that one. One neat little fact, we produce 500 milliliters of CSF per day, but we only have about 100, 150 circulating in our brain and spinal cord at one time. So our bodies are just doing recycling on a continual basis. That is kind of cool. And that foramen of Monroe, maybe if you're a historian and you like President James Monroe, this interventricular foramen right there, here I'm pretending to be Monroe myself, a connector of sorts in politics, I guess. Maybe that works. On to pressures. This was fascinating, and it was more of an FYI that we covered in lecture. But the pressures in the brain, if they do increase, can cause this unfortunate triad of Cushing's here: hypertension, high blood pressure, low heart rate, and your respirations start to become irregular because there's pressure on the brain, and your brain nerves cannot exert its normal function. So just watch out for the pressures. NASA, interestingly, loves to study pressures in the brain in terms of vision, because pressure through the brain goes through the cranial nerves and gets to your optic discs, and you can have a lot of problems with vision if you do not equilibrate correctly. Okay, on to blood flow. This one is one of my favorites, and also I hated it when I was in school. The famous circle of Willis here. To learn the blood flow to the brain, you got to break it up into different pieces. The cerebral blood flow, we have the anterior cerebral arteries, or ACA. If we have an anterior, we're going to have a middle, and if we're going to have a middle, we're going to have a posterior too. The middle cerebral artery is basically a direct extension from the internal carotids, coming up from the brain and then out to MCA. Coming up from the neck, into the brain as the MCA there. So blood flow comes from downstairs at the internal carotids. We have communicators, some redundancy in our brain, which is a good thing. If we get a clot anywhere, the blood can flow along this circle and get to other areas. So an anterior communicating up top here, or up front anteriorly, and a posterior as well to make that bridge all the way across between the PCA and the MCA. And then you have the suppliers coming from downstairs and your heart. The vertebral arteries coming from way down here, forming the basilar artery along the pons and the midbrain and the brainstem, and then the internal carotids that I mentioned. Speaking of that brainstem and cerebellar area, we have the ICA, the pica, and then the SCA. That's not cerebral, that's cerebellar. So superior cerebellar artery and the anterior and posterior versions of the inferior cerebellar artery. Neat thing, we learn this so much and try to figure out all these branches and get it down just perfect, but only about 1 in 5 of us actually have a standard textbook circle of Willis. Related to unfortunate things, if you have a clot that goes up from your heart and carotids, that's why we check with ultrasounds through the carotids here to make sure there's no plaques. If something goes straight up, it's just going to go straight along the path of least resistance. With physics, it's just going to go straight up the internal carotid, or ICA, and straight into the MCA. And this is why, unfortunately, a lot of people have an MCA stroke. That brain blood flow to the brain corresponds to different areas that the brain is responsible for. And if you learn the blood supply and where it's going to the brain and the function of each area of those brains, you can predict what's going to happen, unfortunately, when a patient has a stroke. It is a pretty fascinating array of pathology that can happen. For example, you can get Broca's or Wernicke's aphasia for different types of strokes. You can get lacunar strokes, pontine strokes. The pica, that was a fascinating one when I was learning what happens when that blood flow gets reduced. It is pretty amazing. We're not covering it now, but it's good to learn your circle of Willis. So how do we remember this? Circle of Willis is formed by Poppy, right? Your good old Poppy. This is not exactly in order here, but we have PCA, ACA, the ACOM, PCOM, and the ICA. Easy way to quickly remember the components of the circle. It's Poppy. If you wanted to go in order, clockwise, from the top down, if you follow the cursor here, right there at the ACOM, starting at 12 o'clock, basically, and then you continue down to 1 o'clock here, you get the anterior cerebral arteries right next to it, coming down to the ICA, which eventually becomes MCA, down the PCOM, into the PCA, and then the basilar artery kind of completes the picture, which is fed from the vert. So this is your circle going in basically clockwise direction. So maybe this could sort of help because, you know, all college interns much prefer playing bass violin, right? We all prefer playing bass violin. I don't know, I guess so. FYI, bass, that's the double bass, the giant violin as non-musicians see it. It is pretty cool. I played cello when I was in middle school. I thought it was a lot of fun, actually. I wish I kept that up. Good for the brain to learn some music, so that's good for our lecture. On to some final things here, the blood-brain barrier, another topic we covered in the lecture, which was really fascinating. It does three main things: protects the brain from toxins, it regulates a lot of ions and waste transport, and it maintains your overall central nervous system homeostasis. What makes it up? Just think of your triple shield. No, not that triple shield if you buy that product, but this triple shield, the endothelial cells with their tight junctions, the basement membrane, which is the, so to speak, foundation around that, and then the astrocytes come in with their feet, their end feet that surround it, and those are the extra, well, security guards, if that works for you. I hope that does. I'm trying with mnemonics here, trying to help you out here, the extra brain armor, because we all could use a kind of creepy picture of a brain here with armor in front of it, but it works. EBA, endothelial cells, basement membrane, and the astrocyte end feet, forming that blood-brain barrier to allow certain things through, but not others. This is very important because if you have an issue like an infection and meningitis that can disrupt that blood-brain barrier, unfortunately, in a bad way, toxins can go in, but also, fortunately, it opens them up so the drugs can enter a little quicker and you can get better. When we're making drugs, we can't give dopamine directly to a person with Parkinson's. We have to make L-Dopa because we found out that can cross the blood-brain barrier and then it gets metabolized into dopamine. And sadly, multiple sclerosis and other things that involve blood-brain barrier breakdown allows our immune cells to unfortunately attack our own body, in this case, myelin. So I tried my best with mnemonics. Some of those are really hard. If you got some better ones, absolutely please let me know so I can let our students know. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.